I'm going to try and cover three areas. So we'll look at the case for exercise. I'll talk a little bit about the ProstFit program that we've developed in conjunction with Prostate Cancer Foundation, and we'll talk about referral pathways or the lack thereof. But first of all, we've done a little bit of research in China around a new way of exercising for men with cancer. And this is really exciting. So just take a look at this. It comes up quite quickly, so just take a look at this.
Sash around his penis and scrotum and straps on a 5-kilogram weight.
What made you decide?
Chung Shi came here 4 years ago when he was diagnosed with an enlarged prostate. Conventional science is yet to recognise the benefits of Indiao Gung. Some doctors have suggested it may cause serious injury.
I was going to say no shit, Sherlock, but no kidding. All right, so on a more serious note, if you Google exercise oncology, you'll come up with about 54 million results in 0.43 seconds, which sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Until you realise if you Google how to make pancakes, you come up with 240 million results in 0.39 seconds. So exercise oncology is on the map and it's increasingly gaining traction. But it's actually been on the map for now 2 or 3 decades. It started in the mid-80s. And two leading people from our neck of the woods, one is Rob Newton out of Edith Cowan University in Perth, and the other one is Prue Cormie out of Adelaide. So a lot of what I've done in terms of the courses that I've been on have been their work. So, why is it gaining traction? Well, largely because it works. So this is just a piece of research, numerous pieces of research, and you've heard these numbers before. Certainly those of you who were here yesterday have heard these numbers before. But blah, 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 cancer survival rates 50 to 60% with the strongest, so exercise is promoting cancer survival by 50 to 60% with the strongest benefit being to breast, colorectal, and prostate cancer. 50 to 60% is a lot for those of you who didn't do maths at school. Now, there are 4 main ways in which exercise can help the treatment process. The first of these is prior to exercise in terms of surgical outcomes. So exercise prior to surgery will improve surgical outcomes. The second is that it will increase the effectiveness of chemotherapy and radiotherapy. So we've got improved outcomes, we've got better effect of treatments. The third is it helps to control the side effects of radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and hormone therapy. And the fourth is that it will help to suppress the development of other conditions. So we've got better surgical outcomes, we've got more effective, we've got side effects controlled, and we've got helping to work with to suppress other conditions. Now, some of you may be aware that cardiac conditions are very common with prostate cancer. I also work with cardiac and I work with neuros as well. So I kind of cover all the bases. But one piece of research has found that even a short course of chemo has the same impact on the cardiovascular system as 10 years of aging. One short course of chemo, 10 years of aging. In other words, the risk of slipping into a very fast physical decline after a diagnosis and after treatment, if you do nothing, is very, very high. It's a clear and present danger. So we're not only exercising to counter the effects of treatment, we're also exercising to try and modulate other things that may crop up, comorbidities that may crop up. That's a big incentive to do something, right? Right? Right. Well, no. Not only do most people not increase their activity levels, 75% of them actually reduce activity levels after diagnosis and treatment for cancer. 75%, 3 out of 4 people, reduce their activity levels. Now, I can kind of get that because of the stuff that they're going through, emotional, physical, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is those reductions last. So it's not just reduced over a period of a year, it's reduced for a long time after the diagnosis and after the treatment, which is kind of concerning. Now, there are some clinicians who still believe rest is best after treatment or after surgery. Now, I mentioned Rob Newton earlier. This is what Rob Newton has to say about rest. A perception remains that cancer patients, in particular those undergoing difficult treatments or having more advanced disease, should avoid physical activity and, in particular, strenuous exercise. That perception should be continuously and rigorously challenged. The last thing that you need to do after a cancer diagnosis is avoid exercise. And yet I think there are probably still some clinicians who are recommending that. Certainly it applies in other long-term conditions. Okay, let's get more specific about what exercise can do. So we know that, we talked a little bit yesterday about pelvic floor, and we know that pelvic floor work helps with incontinence, etc., etc. So a good exercise program that contains some pelvic floor work is critical, is essential. And you need to have a skilled exercise professional who understands what to do with that. So we give that a big tick. Then we go to it decreases the severity of erectile dysfunction. Then we'll go to help to maintain sexual desire during ADT, and we know that that's curbed. It can reduce the cancer-related fatigue. And strange, isn't it, really? But if you think about those of you who've ever been to a gym, 99 times out of 100, when I go to a gym, I don't want to go, and I feel a heck of a lot better having gone to it. So the whole fatigue issue is big, and the problem is that fatigue mitigates against you going in the first place, but actually the outcome is significant. Counteracts weight gain, and we know that weight gain is a significant issue after ADT, so cardiovascular exercise and strength training actually will counteract weight gain. Helps to arrest the decline in bone mineral density. So we know that that is an issue, and my understanding is that men having gone through hormone therapy and a number of treatments will be they'll lose 3 times the bone mass of menopausal women. So men are seriously at risk for osteoporosis and all of the conditions associated with bone density. It's anti-atherosclerotic, anti-thrombotic, anti-ischemic, and anti-arrhythmic. Those are all heart conditions, so we talked a little bit about that. So exercise will help to manage all of those conditions. It improves insulin sensitivity and glycemic control, so diabetes. It improves balance, reduces the risk of falls, reverses functional decline. It's anti-anxiety and anti-depression, and it appeals to men as a form of exercise. That last bit is quite important. It appeals. So a workout, a gym-based session or a studio-based session appeals to men as a form of exercise. And it reduces the risk of cognitive decline, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we do for cognitive decline as this talk progresses, and improves cognitive function. So here's the thing. If exercise reduces the treatment side effects, lowers the risk of recurrence, helps to tolerate aggressive treatments, minimizes physical decline, counteracts fatigue, lowers the risk of heart disease, relieves mental distress, improves the quality of life, and staves off death, here's the question. Why is exercise not prescribed at the point of diagnosis by clinicians who have, we'll talk a little bit about this in a second. Every cancer patient should have a prescription to 2 things, in my opinion. One is an exercise group, the other one is a support group. That needs to be active. That's not a bit of paper in the surgery. That needs to be, I'm going to recommend that you join this group and this group. And if you don't want to go, you've got to back out of it. Now, okay, there's all kinds of privacy issues and data issues there, but you take my point. At the moment, the referral pathways for all long-term conditions in New Zealand are pathetic. We are way behind the 8 ball, and it's time we caught up. So, Let's move on. What are the barriers to exercise? 5 things, 5 main barriers to exercise. Lack of guidance from a clinician, pre-existing conditions, increased age, fatigue, and reduced motivation. Right, what are the 3 facilitators of exercise? That's number 2. Number 1, guidance from a clinician. Guidance from a clinician. Spousal involvement, that's spousal involvement things going on there. And taking ownership, i.e. researching what to do yourself. Those are the 3 facilitators of exercise. Which one occurs on both lists? And I'll tell you. That one. Clinical guidance at the outset. There's a theme here. Now, here's the thing with exercise and cancer. Pretty much everyone agrees that the right kind of exercise is important, and so everybody in the room would put their hands up. It's a great adjunct treatment to everything else that's going on. But I would personally be surprised if there's more than 5% of men who actually exercise after a cancer diagnosis, formally exercise after a cancer diagnosis. We need to improve that number. And it's not just clinicians to blame here. It's not just our industry to blame. It's a whole bunch of different things. But we'll focus on some of those in a second. Now, here's the thing that I hear a lot. I go walking. I hear a lot. Look, that's great, and I love the walking thing, but bad news. No matter how far or how fast you walk, it isn't enough. There are lots of other aspects to your work, to your training that you need to do to counteract the effects of the treatment for prostate cancer. So walking is wonderful, swimming, biking, whatever it is you want to do. But you need to have a rounded, structured exercise program if you're really going to cope with the symptoms of treatment. Now, nobody is saying that exercise after a cancer diagnosis is easy. I haven't been in that situation. So look, I had a whole bunch of guys that I've talked to, and yeah, the feedback is, it is tough. We're talking about complex behavioural change here that applies to everybody, not just people who've had cancer diagnosis. But the one thing we do know is that trust plays a really, really important role in who and what we listen to. So we listen to people that we trust. And this is where it really comes down to, for me, the change that needs to be made. The teachable moment that clinicians have at the point of diagnosis is both priceless and wasted, because treatment stops there. And I'll probably get a whole bunch of clinicians now jumping all over me afterwards, but that they have a wonderful teachable moment to stress the importance of exercise, and it's ignored largely, and that's got to change. Now, wouldn't an active referral mechanism that just simply has a form that gets sent from clinician, nurse, straight through to an exercise professional, doesn't take long, wouldn't that be a slam dunk for both parties, for everybody? Be a slam dunk for the state in terms of the money spent on treatment, the money spent on recurrence of cancers, be a slam dunk for the patients. I don't think it's that hard to do. What's happening in other countries? Well, it's not that I like stereotypes or anything, but Australia's pretty onto it. This is a positioning statement from the Clinical Oncology Society of Australia, COSA. And this was Prue Cormie's work. It's our position that all health professionals involved in the care of people with cancer should view and discuss exercise, recommend people with cancer adhere to exercise guidelines, and refer patients to an exercise physiologist, or physiotherapist with experience in cancer care. That's the position statement. That's been bought into by, I think, 25 organisations in Australia. I'm not entirely sure how they're doing with that, but it was a real line in the sand, and it seems to me that something similar for New Zealand might be a good idea. So, what are we doing in New Zealand? Well, funny you should ask that. That leads us on to the Prostate programme. Now this, as Graham said, was inspired by Jenny, who sat over there, and I watched Jenny's presentation last year, and then gave her a call and said, I think we can do something here. You're a nurse, I'm an exercise professional, let's see if we get our heads together and do something in Christchurch. So we put something together in Christchurch, And the aim was to develop, as Graham said, a program that we could roll out across the country. And I think we've almost got there. We just got a few T's to cross and I's to dot, but we're in a position now where that program has been approved by whoever needs to improve it at the top level. And I'm now in the process of writing the training courses to train exercise professionals to deliver it. That was the key, that it's not something that can be delivered in little pockets. If this is going to go across New Zealand, then we need access to exercise professionals. And I guess in my business, I've got access to about 3,000 of them. And they won't all want to do this, by the way, but the goal is to have every leisure centre in New Zealand with somebody who understands how to work with prostate cancer. That's the goal. So it's a big, fat, hairy goal, but I think it's doable. So what's our program based on? Well, we use the American College of Sports Medicine for our guidelines in our particular industry. And I'm not going to dwell too long on these. You can read them for yourselves. But improved body composition, improved cardiorespiratory, endocrine, neurological outcomes, reduce daily recurrence or secondary primary cancer, improve the ability to physically and psychologically withstand ongoing anxiety. That's an interesting one. Reduce, attenuate, and prevent. Blah, blah, blah. So these are the baselines that we use. Now, in a clinical setting, what you do, and it's what Rob Newton does and Prue Cormie do, is they will do one-on-one. So they'll have somebody in for an hour screen, if not more than an hour, and they'll do a complete physiological exam, including possibly even a 3-lead ECG, but certainly they'll be doing a lot more than we can do. That's great in a clinical setting. It won't work in a commercial setting. So we run classes. Our classes will ideally run at, say, 12 people. So it's very difficult to screen everyone coming into the class for an hour or so. So we've had to look at a different way of doing it. We have a pre-screen form that we have filled in before they come, which will give us all of the symptoms, all of the meds, anything, comorbidities, et cetera, et cetera. So we like to think we've got a fair amount of information before we start working. And so we don't put somebody with a rotator cuff injury into a boxing program, which, believe me, can be done. And then we use the pre-screen to cover off all the treatments, and then we'll refer back to the GP or clinician if we feel that we need to. We'll also take blood pressure, and we use finger oximeters to do heart rates, and we'll also use the RPE scale. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's observational, but also machine-based, if you like, in terms of measuring exercise intensity. So we like to think that we can do the best we possibly can with the resources that we have available. Why do you need a specialist prostate cancer class? Well, the power of the group over the individual is pretty well known. The class is really an important part in terms of connection, motivation, and adherence. So these guys get to know each other, and they come back for the class, we hope, because they're great fun, but also for that rest of the team. So group beats one-on-one every time. There are certain things that, although a general exercise program, there's a lot of it's largely applicable to prostate cancer. There are certain considerations with prostate that an exercise professional needs to know about. So it's really important that you get a specialist exercise professional dealing with you, not somebody who's just a personal trainer. And that's nothing against personal trainers, but trust is really important, so an exercise professional who understands the right questions to ask and what the answers mean, really important. And working in a group helps us to keep the cost down. Now, I'm going to go slightly off-piste here. When I first talked to Jenny last year, she said, the cost. I said, what is the cost? She said, it was free. I said, well, there's no cost then, is there? Then I think it went up to $3 or something like that, Jenny, or I don't know. Anyway, we had this, she could hear me at the other end of the phone going, are you kidding? It's interesting. Funded projects are flawed. And the reason that funded projects are flawed is because they finish. And when they finish, then that's it, because everybody's at it for free. So part of our pilot was we needed to understand what price was going to work. And so we charged $8, a whole $8 for a class. And in the research that we did afterwards, we asked whether or not that was okay. And a lot of the men said, actually, you need to charge more. And they all said, yeah, absolutely fine. Now, that's not to say that some people can't afford it. And when it can't be afforded, then we make provision for that. But cost is not an issue if you lay on a good class. I say if you lay on a good class. So let's talk a bit about the elements of CrossFit. So CrossFit is fun. So they would play over-under all day. I charge them $8 for over-under. Okay. So we go strength and impact work, muscular atrophy we're working on, muscle function, etc. So strength and impact work really important. Aerobic work, and we've spoken about why aerobic work is important, particularly for cardiovascular conditioning. Pelvic floor, yeah, we've spoken about that. I tried to find one that was appropriate. I think that one works. The analogy is, just imagine, boys, you're walking into the sea at Sumner. It's cold at Sumner. All right, what do? As you go in. So that's our pelvic floor analogy. Whether or not it works, who knows? Cognition, yeah, well, these are cardiac patients, actually, and I asked them to put the ball between them and walk down the gym, but one's about a foot taller than the other, so didn't work. So cognition, we get them working on lots of different cognitive drills as they're working. Flexibility, and so you'll see Pete there, he's sat down at that table across there, so we work on their flexibility. Balance, so this is what happened when we asked the boys to find their centre of gravity. Never found it. So we were, actually Chris would have stayed there all day, he's opposite me. So again, balance is important. And yeah, coordination. I thought this is classic for coordination, isn't it? Right? So we're all in time here, aren't we? So, right, so anyway, then stillness. Stillness. Actually, Jenny was saying the other day that meditation, her guys enjoy meditation quite unexpectedly. So do ours. I don't know if they're meditating or just collapse, but that's our stillness. And hey, the last bit is coffee, and that's really, really important. So, just coming up, and I'll quickly wrap this up now, if I may. Have I got 1 minute to wrap up? Yep. All good. So what have we learned? We've learned that recruitment is challenging. So recruitment is, and this is where I've been talking to Graham, if we roll this out, then if we can invest in ads, et cetera, to recruit men to these groups initially, then that's really important. You'll find that the exercise professionals won't do that. So the support groups have got to kick in and get men there. We've got to understand the physical and psychological challenges. Men like to strength train, no doubt about that, so let's put a little bit of strength work in. It's important anyway. Balance is important, as is cognitive function. Fun is essential, so these classes we try and make as much fun as possible. Hopefully you've seen that. Coffee's pretty important. CrossFit is actually another support group in its own right, so we've got people who don't go to the support group who do go to CrossFit. So, and we hope we can feed them into the support groups from there. Prostate cancer is a couples thing. I've heard that a lot. I didn't know that before we started working, but it's a couples thing. Boy, have I seen that here with the number of wives and partners represented and the praise that they get. Cost isn't an issue. Right, and the last one. If you don't exercise, the worst thing that can happen isn't that you die. Nope, the worst thing that can happen is that you live and you're bloody miserable. Thank you.